Hi everyone, welcome back to the Frantic Seamstress. Today we'll be sewing the 2025 Holiday Wrap Dress. The pattern is available for Classic and Pear Smartdolls. First, head over to the website and download the free sewing pattern for the wrap dress. There are two versions of the pattern, one for the classic version and one for the pear. Ensure that you print them at 100% scale. For this tutorial, we will be sewing the classic version of the doll dress. Fortunately, there is only one step difference between the classic and the pear. The pattern has a front bust piece, a back piece with darts, however the pear does not have darts in the back, a sleeve, a waistband, and a guide to assemble the skirt. The skirt piece is made up of 10 individual pieces of paper that need to be trimmed and taped together. Each large pattern piece has a number corresponding to the diagram to help keep things organized. Cut off the edge of the paper along the pattern line and tape it to the corresponding side. Do this for all 10 pieces. You will note that this pattern has 3 different skirt lengths. Cut here for the short skirt, here for the midi skirt, and here for the floor length skirt. For the tutorial today, we'll be using the short skirt pattern. Cut out each of the pattern pieces. Please note that the seam allowance of 1/4 inch has already been included. When cutting out your fabric, note the grain lines, which are indicated here in the small arrows. Please note that the casing fold line at the bottom of the sleeve is 1/2 inch. For this tutorial, I'm going to use materials and threads that show up easily on camera. The type of fabrics you choose will change the overall look of the dress. We will look at more examples of this at the end of the tutorial. The red fabric is our main fabric, the white is our lining, blue is for our regular straight stitch, and gray is for our serger. Cut out 2 skirt pieces. If your fabric has a good and a bad side, ensure that they are mirrored so you have 2 pieces that are opposite each other with the good sides up. We also need to cut 2 sleeves. Please note on the pattern we have 3 notches at the top. The first notch shows where we start gathering, the second notch shows where we finish gathering, and the center aligns to the bodice notch to help us even out the gathering. You will need to transfer these notches onto your sleeves. I recommend using an erasable pen, chalk, or making a tiny little clip not more than 1/8 inch into your fabric. Cut 2 waistband pieces and transfer the notches in the same way. Cut 2 front bodice pieces out of your main fabric and 2 out of your lining fabric, transferring the notches onto all pieces. Finally, cut 1 back piece out of your main fabric. Use chalk to transfer the darts and use chalk to transfer the notches. I've also gone ahead and made little clips at these notches, as when we iron the darts, the chalk will disappear. It will also be helpful to mark the center bottom and center back neckline. You will also need 1 lining back. I've used an erasable pen to draw the darts on the lining, as the white chalk will not show up. I did a test piece beforehand to ensure that this pen will come out when ironed. The first step is to sew the back darts in both of the bodice pieces. To do this, I fold the fabric in half at the dart and start at the bottom. I do a few back and forth stitches to secure the thread, then stitch directly up the dart line, falling completely off the tip. I do not back and forth stitch at the tip, but instead I give myself some long threads to tie off later. Stitch all 4 of your darts, then return to the top of each dart and untangle the threads that you left. Tie 2 or 3 loop knots at the top of each dart, then trim the thread to about 1/4 of an inch from the fabric. This will give you a nice flat dart on a miniature scale. Iron the darts on both of your back pieces by pushing the darts towards the center. If it won't damage the fabric, it's a good idea to turn the back pieces over and press them from the front as well. Press your back lining the same way. Next, we're going to assemble the shoulder seams by attaching the 2 bodice front pieces to the back. With good sides up, take the bodice pieces and fold them over onto the back, matching up the shoulder seams. Pin the seams together and stitch both of them with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Repeat this process with the lining pieces. Press the shoulder seams opened on both the lining and the main bodice pieces. Lay the bodice piece flat, good side up, and place the lining, good side down, on top. We are going to pin and stitch the neckline, which is this long U shape in the center. Once the neckline has been stitched, we need to make little tiny clips all along the curved part of the neckline. Be careful not to cut into your stitch line or any of the shoulder seams. Next, we are going to understitch our neckline. We do this by opening up our bodice piece, pushing the seam allowance to the lining side, and running a small stitch next to the seam right on the edge of the lining. As you sew, keep checking the back of the material to make sure that the seam allowance is going towards the lining. Take your time with the curved part. It can be helpful to keep the fabric taut on each side as you go with your fingers. Next, iron the neckline with the lining up. The understitch will help it roll nicely so that we only see a small amount of the main fabric popping up over the edge. Pin and stitch the fabric to the lining all the way around the unfinished edge. Stitch all the way around 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Serge the bottom hem of each sleeve. With the right side of the fabric facing down, turn up each bottom hem 1/2 an inch to create the casing. Press the casing down to make it easier to sew. Stitch the casing down 3/8 of an inch from the folded edge, or follow the bottom of the serging line. Cut 2 pieces of elastic 3 inches long each. This elastic is 3 millimeters wide, or 1/8 of an inch. Use a loop turner or a safety pin to thread the elastic through the sleeve casing. Leave a 1/2 inch of elastic hanging out from the side and pin to secure. Pull the elastic through and do the same on the other side, leaving a 1/2 inch out. Pin this side down as well. Machine or hand stitch the elastic to the casing where the pin is so that you can remove the pin for the next steps. Repeat the process for the second sleeve. Now we will insert our sleeve into our armhole. Take note how the 3 notches on the sleeve coordinate with the seam and 2 notches on the bodice armhole. With good sides up, flip the sleeve over on top of the bodice. It will be easier to pin if you turn this towards you, keeping the sleeve on top. Start by matching the underarm seams. Continue pinning the sleeve flat until you reach the first notch. Take your time and ease the fabric into the curve, ensuring that there are no puckers on either side. Move to the other side of the sleeve armhole and do the same thing, pinning only up to the first notch. Now we can gather the excess amount of the sleeve cap onto the bodice. Find the middle notch and match it to the middle notch on the bodice. Place a pin. Now we have 2 little bubbles left over. It's a little easier to see when I turn it around. Because these are so small, I'm not going to use a running stitch. I'm just going to gather with my hands. To do that, I'm going to press each bubble down halfway and place a pin. Now I'll stitch across the entire armhole seam, making sure that I flatten my pleats when I sew. Keep checking the underside of your fabric as you sew to make sure nothing is bunching up or folding over. Repeat the process for the second sleeve and serge the seam. Next we will sew the sleeve and bodice side seam. To do this, fold the bodice in half with good sides together and match up the underarms of the sleeve and the sides. Pin the underarm seam first and ensure the seam allowances are going up towards the sleeve. Sew the side seam and clip the excess elastic off before serging. Pay special attention to the cuff and go back and forth with the seam a few times to secure it. To prevent your serging thread from fraying at the end of a cuff, don't clip it. Instead, use a darning needle or a large eye needle and thread it onto the needle. Stitch it back into the seam for about 1 inch, then trim. Turn your bodice right side out, and there we go, the top half is done. Next, we're going to work on the waistband. Serge the center back seam of each waistband piece first. With good sides together, lay the waistband pieces on top of each other, matching the center back. If you want to have an opening in the back for the stand, follow the stitch guides on the pattern. Be sure to secure the tiny seams by going back and forth at the beginning and the end of each one. Press the center back seam open flat. With good sides together, pin, sew, and serge the center back seam of the skirt. Iron the seam to one side. Attach the longer end of the waistband to the inner circle of the skirt. With good sides together, match the center seam of the waistband with the center seam of the skirt and pin. Match the center front of the waistband to the center front of the skirt and ease the waistband into the skirt curve until the entire seam is pinned. Take your time and ease the waistband into the skirt, ensuring that nothing is puckering on the skirt side. Sew the waistband seam and serge. The seam will push up towards the top of the dress. Also serge the front sides, ensuring that the seam pushes up towards the dress. Serge the bottom hem as well. Turn the bottom hem of the skirt up 1/4 of an inch towards the inside. Stitch along the bottom. Depending on your fabric, this bottom hem may come out a little bit wobbly. Usually ironing will fix it. Match the waistband to the bodice by aligning the center back seams, the first notch to the side seam, the second notch to the first bust notch, the third notch to the second bust notch, and the end of the bodice 1/4 inch away from the edge of the waistband. Flip the bodice down onto the skirt, good sides together, and pin the corresponding notches. So now we're left with this little bump, which is where our bust seam gathers are going to be. I find it easier to turn it towards me and use my fingers to create even pleats. So I do this by first compressing the pleat halfway, which creates 2 little bubbles on each side. I repeat the same process with each of these smaller bubbles by splitting them in half and pinning them. Pin both of these pleats the same way, then sew and serge the entire seam. Now that both of the waistband seams have been sewn and serged, ensure that they are pointing towards each other. Finish the front edge of the skirt by folding it over 1/4 of an inch. Ensure that you are folding it over the seam allowance of the bodice to make a nice clean edge. Depending on your fabric, you may want to hand stitch this or you can machine stitch this. For today's tutorial sample, I've chosen to machine stitch it. Our final step is to add the snaps. This dress can fold over in either direction as it is symmetrical. You will need 2 sets of snaps, and on the waistband it indicates where to put each one. Please note, depending on your fabric, your doll, and the bust size of your doll, you may need to adjust how far apart you place these snaps for a nice snug fit around the waist. In our New Year's Eve dress, you can see our 2 black sets of snaps here in the front. The stud or pointy side is on the inside layer, and the socket is on the outside layer. I then added 2 small beads to look like decorative buttons. This version of the dress was made with a slinky, stretchy fabric. There are a few notes in working with that. First, the waistband I interfaced because I do not want this part of my dress to be stretchy. I also made sure the lining fabric I chose was not stretchy, as I wanted the bodice to have a tight fit as well. This fabric can be tricky, but it does give you a nice flowy drape. In the Christmas version of this dress, I have used a much stiffer satin on the bottom. Because of that, the folds are quite thick and stand out from the doll's body. I needed to tack some of the pleats to keep them down. Additionally, I lined the entire bottom of the skirt with a light cotton batiste. This way I could avoid having any hem stitches on the bottom or on the front sides. I also lined the waistband and the bodice. I hope you've enjoyed this project today. Please tag us in your work and show us what you've made.